podcast. Here with me today, I have the founder and CEO of Total Advantage, NASCAR driver on the side as well, and a personal trainer. He does all the things. Landon Huffman. Thanks for coming on. Appreciate you coming on. I think this is going to be a pretty fun episode.
Yeah, absolutely. I appreciate you having me on. I enjoy podcasts, so we'll see what we can get into with it.
Yeah, for sure. So question number one is kind of always, what was your first experience in the esports space? Not necessarily your first job, but your first encounter with the space, and what got you started?
So I would say I'm still fairly new to esports, but I was introduced to it back in 2011, 2012. I was 15, 16 years old. I'm not sure if you're familiar with the platform iRacing. It's a web service-based sim racing software, subscription-based program, and a lot of us NASCAR drivers use it as a training tool. But back in the day, they had developed a pro series within the sim, and I was one of the top 50 sim racers that were a part of the NASCAR. It was NASCAR sanctioned, and I actually participated in that series for a year, and then I participated in the qualification series prior to that year. So I was, I guess, quote unquote, a professional sim racer. It paid like 10 grand to win the series back then. Now, of course, I wish I would have stayed with it because it pays like 100 grand to win. So it's definitely a lot bigger now than it was then. But that was probably my first, I guess, encounter with the esports scene. Now, granted, the motorsports sim racing scene is a lot smaller than, the overall esports scene in general. But a lot of the sim racing side of things is the majority of people that are already in the motorsports industry that just enjoy gaming. And a lot of the drivers use it too. So I actually got to race against people that I was actually racing in real life on the sim. So that was probably my first encounter with esports. And then I've always been a gamer, but it kind of here as of recent has led to Total Advantage. So,
Hey, how's it going? Just wanted to jump in here real quick and remind you, if you haven't already, to like, follow, subscribe, comment, share, let a friend know about the podcast if you enjoy it. If you've been listening this far, however many episodes you're in, things like the sharing and the commenting and telling your friends and all that. It really helps me out, and it helps me understand what I could do to do better. That's it. That's all I got. Here's the rest of the episode. That makes sense. So Total Advantage. Where did that kind of get birthed? Maybe talk me through a little bit where you came up with the name. The whole process around Total Advantage.
Yeah, for sure. So, like I said, I've been a pretty heavy console gamer. I would say back since I played PlayStation 1. Probably was my first console. I played all the way through. Played PS2, a bunch of sports games mainly, and then I was introduced to Call of Duty during Modern Warfare 2 and fell in love with that. Played it for probably 3 or 4 years. I left when the jetpack stuff came about, and I was out of probably gaming, I would say, for 3 years or so, and then bought a copy of World War II and got back into it, and I was playing it since then. And then probably here January of this year, I would say, I started exploring the competitive esports scene, getting more involved in it. Obviously, like I said, I had the background with the sim racing stuff, so I kind of knew that, knew somewhat about the space to a certain extent. And so I started exploring the competitive Call of Duty scene and kind of, what genres were popular and all that good stuff. And I had been, obviously I've been working with, businesses and companies on the racing side of things for years. And I seen a void, a large gap between the motorsports and racing industry and the esports industry. Now, granted, esports is huge and thriving right now, right? Well, racing, some people would say, NASCAR specifically, is somewhat on the downward slope, which we still pull in a lot of viewership, and our analytical numbers are still very high compared to that of other sports. But the one thing that is better than motorsports right now from an analytical standpoint is that of esports. I was interested because there's not very many of the Fortune 500 companies or the just major companies in general that are involved in motorsports actually within the esports scene. And I felt like I had a special opportunity or a unique opportunity to be able to introduce some of those companies that are involved in motorsports into the esports scene through a different, I guess, way. That being, my racing career. And so I seen an avenue there, and I started working on it, like I said, in January or so. And I finally got everything put together and decided I was going to call my organization Total Advantage. And then I brainstormed for a couple of months, and I had a bunch of crazy names, and that one was one of the simpler names. And I was just like, well, I like it, and I felt like I could build a brand around it. So that was kind of what we went with, or what I went with. And then I guess that took us to May, into May. That was when I decided I had all the parts and pieces to kind of kickstart everything. And then we sent a team to CWL Miami. I also signed a Call of Duty or a Pokemon video game championships kid who competed at the World Championships. He also won the Dallas, Texas regional last year, but that kind of got us off the ground and running. And I knew that I had to build a background and a backbone for the organization so I could pitch to some of these companies on the racing side, because there had to be something there for them to see a value, not just me pitching the scene in general. I had to have some type of backbone to a company, and I felt like I did well with that. And pretty much all I did was log information, and I sent teams to, like I said, CWL Miami, and then we fielded a team here in Charlotte in September. But my whole entire goal with that was just to build a track record. That way I could start pitching it to some of these sponsors, and that's kind of the step that I'm at right now. And I feel like growth wise, we've shown strong growth on our social media, and Twitter being the main one. But now we've really started to kind of dabble into the scene more as a whole, and stepped into the content creation side. We just signed, I believe it's a total of 8 members to the content creation team. So we're actually launching them officially this week. We have a few Mixer partners and a couple of Twitch partners. So trying to be more well-rounded as an organization, but it's taken some time, and I'm just trying to do everything the right way while still learning about the esports industry, because obviously, like I said, I'm still new to it, so I learn something new every day. So.
Yeah. I mean, that's probably the beautiful thing about the space. Obviously now, as time has gone on, things prove to work or not work. So there's some things that are a little bit less of a learning process, but the greatest thing about esports is that it's still very much the Wild West, and as long as you're legal, it's pretty much anything goes, which is it's always interesting to see.
Yeah, it's a good thing and a bad thing.
Exactly. Yeah, exactly. So you mentioned Pokemon and Call of Duty. Those are the 2 things that you're in mainly right now. What are your plans as far as expansion goes, if you care to discuss, bigger picture?
So 2020, we're going to have a team at least probably 12 events, 10 to 12 Call of Duty events. Right now, everything's up in the air with the competitive scene in Call of Duty, as I'm sure you know. Mm-hmm. We have no idea what the amateur scene is going to look like. Obviously, with franchising this year, there was no way that was going to be an option, unless I just busted ass to try to put together investors. And even at that, I just don't feel like that would have been smart. But with Call of Duty side being up in the air, I'm not really sure where the amateur scene is going to be at. I feel like we are going to have some type of solid amateur group of tournaments put on by Activision, kind of like the open bracket stuff. I just don't really know. Nobody knows what it's going to be like, but I feel like they have to have some type of solid system, especially to develop players for the Pro League. So as far as Call of Duty goes, my goal with Total Advantage for 2020 is to try to be a premier development organization within the amateur scene. I'm not necessarily trying to be any more than that. I just want to try to bring in young players. And, a lot of the organizations right now, at least that I've noticed, which, like I said, I didn't really have much prior knowledge to the organizations in the scene, especially Call of Duty, but I've noticed that organizations like to just pick up a roster for all these local events, and they send a different local roster to every event, and there's no synergy between the players and the organization. So nobody really cares about the organization because people are fans of the players and the players only. And when they change teams all the time, it's hard to even develop any kind of camaraderie or between a fan base and your organization, I feel like.
Yeah.
So one of the goals for me this year was to pick, 6 to 10 Call of Duty kids and try to take them, that group, have a starting five for our major events, and then try to piece my local rosters together out of that group of 8 to 10 kids and try to show them and teach them how to build their brand past just the gaming stuff, and try to be more well-rounded as a person in the scene. That way they can position themselves for opportunities with the league team potentially. But my biggest goal for 2020 is to be able to storytell. I want to try to develop stories around each player. Like I said, I feel like there's a huge misconception when it comes to people on the outside looking in, and I feel like some organizations, like I said, even see it wrong. Is it's not about winning is great and everything, and we all want to win, but what good is it just to win and not have a story behind your players or a story behind your organization? There's no if you're not creating any content around what you're doing, then it doesn't really get you anywhere, in my opinion. I mean, there's maybe if you're winning every tournament, then that's a successful business approach. But everything I've learned in motorsports, it's all about the story you can portray and how you sell it to potential sponsors. But so that's as far as Call of Duty goes. And then I'm going to have a Pokemon kid again this year. He's going to go to, I think, around 10 to 15 events, depending on which ones he's wanting to go to. And then if he qualifies for the World Championships, we'll go to London for that. I went to Washington, D.C. for this past one, and it was an interesting experience. Yeah. That's definitely a scene that I wasn't very aware of, but there's a lot of attention on it within the genre that people are kind of skipping out on. And then beyond that, I'd like to, if my funds are there, I'd like to go after a couple of Fortnite kids, just because I feel like if you're not trying to do something in that genre right now, then you're missing out. But at the same time, if I'm going to do it, I'm going to do it right. And that requires some money to go after some of the people that I feel could qualify for the World Cup and so forth. But
yeah,
that's kind of where I'm at.
Yeah, I mean, it sounds like you got a pretty solid plan. And definitely options. You mentioned, we talked a week or so ago about, some things. And when you mentioned Pokemon, I guess not understanding, I know Pokemon Go, the game itself is huge, but there's a lot of games on the App Store that are huge. But when you told me there's, so many X, Y, and Z competitors that are involved in it, and there's all these people, it's like, I don't know. I think Pokemon Go is probably one of the most underrated. I don't know if, is it an esports title? How does the game even work at a competitive level?
So I had to kind of brief myself on this too, and it's not actually Pokemon Go. It's and it's not console, but I'm going to use console. It's the console game, like Pokemon version, which has been on the handheld devices produced by Nintendo for the past however many years. But this year, it's actually switching to quote unquote a console, which would be the Switch. So I think their scene could potentially grow a lot this year, being that it's on an actual home console, if you will. But basically, each player has Pokemon that they've trained and developed, and each one has special abilities, and one may have a higher attack and higher speed stat, but it may have a really low defense stat and hit points are low or something like that. And it's pretty much like a chess match, I guess. It's a round-based competition, and you can have 2 Pokemon on the battlefield at once, and then you just take turns back and forth, and each Pokemon has moves, and then whichever person knocks out the opponent's team first wins. So it's, I don't know. I had to, like I said, I had to teach myself the process. But I mean, the live streams have anywhere from 8,000 to 50,000 people watching it, and I mean that's not huge in esports, but I would say it's pretty big compared to some of the other stuff that we watch. I mean, the open bracket for Call of Duty only averaged 8 or 10,000 on Championship Sunday stuff. So.
Yeah.
and like 3 to 4,000 outside of that. So.
Yeah, definitely interesting. I guess um, I played the first, like the original set of Pokemon games, or maybe not the original, the second set, red, blue, and yellow. That's when I first
Yep.
started and understood of Pokemon. But it's crazy. Like there was always tournaments, even when I was a kid. The first, second generation games, and it's crazy that like you stick with anything. But I mean, at anything, even outside of esports, like NASCAR is a good example because you drive NASCAR. But
Yeah.
for someone who doesn't know anything about NASCAR, it's like, oh, whether they're interested or not, they might be like, oh, who wants to watch people drive in circles all day? But at the same time, there's people in the space that are like, this guy's crazy and this guy will do this. I don't really know what. I'm not too well versed in NASCAR, but I know there's definitely people that are just crazy fans of it.
Yeah, it's to each their own. I mean, pretty much any professional sport or category has their own select group of fans, and some are larger than others. But I think the Pokemon community is one that has been, I guess, for lack of a better term, slept on, especially when it comes to esports.
Mm-hmm.
So I felt like I was a early mover in that aspect, and that was one of the reasons why I chose to jump into that scene initially. Was for one, it's low barrier to entry, and two, there's a lot of eyeballs on these events that people just don't realize, and there's really no organizations taking advantage of the fact that these kids are actually at on land playing in a LAN event. So like these are, and Pokemon supports the players a lot. Like they put a lot of money into these events, and if the players qualify for the World Championships, they cover their full all expenses paid trip to the World Championships and all that stuff. So like our player qualified for Worlds this year, and it didn't cost us a dime to send him. Like
Wow.
Pokemon covered everything. So it's just, yeah. So it's actually impressive what they do for their scene. Granted, I think I'm not sure if CWL helps out teams that qualified for champs or not. If you're an open bracket team, I'm not sure how that works, but I assume they probably did something for them.
I'm definitely not privy to that info. I know there are games that do cover things like that. I want to say like, oh, what game was it? That I don't know. There's definitely games out there that do it. I know it's not all of the games. I don't know if Call of Duty, maybe it was the champ team, the top or the pro teams or whatever. But at the same time, I'm not sure, so definitely don't quote me on that. But there are games that do it, and those are the games that I think Fortnite is one of them. That like they cover all that for all the top 100 people or whoever's competing in the actual tournament, and then whoever they invite. And that's why games like that are doing well, because there's structure to it. It's not just a bunch of people competing at an event and then everybody just goes on their way and people get their money and leave. That's why I think Fortnite does so well or did so well this past year, and that's why I'm sure Pokemon does so well, because they cater to their
players.
Yeah, their players, and even probably past that. Obviously, not knowing everything about Pokemon, but I'm sure they cater to their content people, their big names in the content space, and things like that.
So far, I guess in the little time that I've been heavily involved in the esports scene, I've noticed that the genres that seem to cater the casual product to the competitive product as well, those seem to have a much higher success rate when it comes to the competitive scene. I mean, everybody always likes to bash Call of Duty and Activision because they don't cater to the competitive player enough, but it's kind of the honest truth. I mean, if they were to just looking at numbers, if Activision or Activision Blizzard, whatever, or the devs, Infinity Ward, Treyarch, and those guys, if they were able to, I guess, capture the interest of the casual gamer in a more competitive way, Call of Duty competitive would be insanely massive. But the problem is there's such a disconnect between the casual Call of Duty player and like your competitive scene that it's really hard to capture their attention, I guess. Like I said, that's where the storytelling comes in. You have to be able to develop the fan base in order for the competitive side of things to function and be the profitable business. So
Yeah, I mean, and you mentioned that the disconnect with Call of Duty. I think they made a huge stride in it with was it this game? Was it this game or the last game? I think it was World War II, where they transitioned it to 5v5, and then the public matches stuff went from 6v6 to 5v5. So they added a player to the competitive scene and removed the player from the public space. So it made the game feel like what you're playing out of the box is what the pros are playing. And there's a lot of arguments that League of Legends is the way it is, and it's as big as it is, and it stays consistently at the top because I could queue up in a ranked game, and I'm not good, but in theory, if I was a good enough player, I could queue with any of the pros that are queuing in a ranked game. There's no kind of limitation. So I think Call of Duty made a big stride with what they're doing. I also, depending on how the beta is versus the actual game for the new game, looked like they took a step back from that, which is kind of interesting, but maybe they have plans, maybe they don't. But it'll be interesting to see what that looks like.
I think Modern Warfare has a lot of potential to be both a positive game and a successful game from a casual standpoint and a competitive standpoint. But I've seen some of the leaked rumors today as far as competitive goes. And like I said, they're just rumors. But if that's the case, then I think competitive may take a step back, which it doesn't really make sense for me, given that they're putting all the emphasis on the franchising and all that stuff. But I know we're sort of off topic, I guess, from where our original point was, but I seen where they noticed or announced or leaked, I guess, that Hardpoint would not be a competitive game mode.
Yeah.
It's not going to be in the game at launch. And then also we only were getting 10 competitive maps or 10 multiplayer maps in total. So that means that the competitive map selection is going to have to come out of those 10. And if that's the case, well, the 4 we played in the beta, I'd say there's probably only 2 of those that would even be considered a competitive map, and maybe even just for search and destroy. The spawns were atrocious, so I don't know. I'm not a competitive player, so my opinion is, I guess, rather useless if you look at it that way. But that's kind of just I don't really understand why they would do those things, especially with the franchising and everything, because this game potentially could catapult Call of Duty to another level as far as esports goes, or it could drive it in the ground.
Yeah, I think what they're I don't know if I remember reading this or seeing it somewhere, but I thought that they did away from your standard 3-lane map. So it's not symmetrical. And if you remember, all the maps from the beta were definitely not symmetrical. So I don't know if that has something to do with it. I mean, for all we know, they might revisit. I doubt they revisit those maps, but the other maps that we didn't play could be some banger maps that are perfect for competitive. And odds are that this didn't happen, but there's a chance that they flew out some pros and they signed NDAs and they did all the testing with them because maybe that happened, but at the end of the day, we don't know.
I'm hoping so.
Yeah, that'd be great.
We'll see.
Yeah, I mean, the game comes out in 2 weeks now at this point?
3 weeks? It's close.
So it's right around the corner. So we'll see. And obviously, it wouldn't be a Call of Duty if there wasn't things that needed to be adjusted out of the box. I guess we'll see. Fingers crossed. As a OG Call of Duty lover and fan and player, fingers crossed as always. But we'll see.
I mean, the game's going to be fun regardless. We know that. It's just the little nitpicky things, and it'll take it a few weeks to a month to iron out, I'm sure, especially the concerns the competitive scene has. Because that's one thing about the Call of Duty competitive scene is they are extremely vocal.
Oh, yeah.
They make their opinion known.
Yeah.
And it's not it's definitely not questioned, or it's not a questionable feat. I mean, they make it known what they think. So I guess in ways that's a good thing. So.
Yeah, for sure. I guess to swing back around here, you mentioned back when you went through your the initial entry into esports and all that, you were trying to find or fill the void, or however you worded it, between NASCAR and motorsports, I think is how you worded it, and esports. without, I guess, getting too far into your plans, what is your thought process behind doing that? What is where do you see that going? How do you see that fitting best? And what are your kind of strides to get that done?
So my experience business wise is from the marketing side of things in NASCAR. Obviously, I've worked on putting together sponsorships for my own racing career, but within those sponsorship and marketing activation programs that we've done, I tend to veer heavily to the business to business side of things. And by that, I mean, the majority of the deals that I've done are what we call business to business deals where, you know, and me and you talked about this, had a conversation about this on Twitter, but there's very few marketing deals these days that are straight from the surface marketing activation programs. There are some, and I think esports is a scene that you can effectively do a marketing activation program without any underlying business to business work, which means that you can create a campaign surrounding a company, um, advertising with your brand on your jerseys, on your social medias, all that good stuff. But like I said, you have to create content around it. Like there has to be some type of storytelling to benefit the company
Yeah.
and campaign for the product. But the business to business stuff that I've done is where we would I had a contact list of retailers and distributors. Some were in grocery, some were in outdoors products, some were sporting goods. And I would go out and look for companies within racing or companies that I felt that were good targets for the motorsports industry, that had products that would fit into these companies or into these retailers and stores. And then I would basically pitch them on a deal to where they commit X amount of money for a marketing and activation program with myself and the race team that I'm driving for at the time. And then I would introduce them to my contacts for distribution. So if they committed X amount of money to us, we would introduce them to a company that could get them into 4,000 retail locations. Well, right then it's a no-brainer for them because they can't pay whatever X amount we were asking just to get into those stores.
Mm-hmm.
They would have to be a substantially larger amount of money just to even get into, say, 4,000 locations. But for them, it's like a no-brainer because they get the marketing and activation of being in NASCAR and on a truck or a car every weekend at a major venue, but they also are immediately getting the introduction to a distribution avenue to get their product into stores. So all of that, take all that and put together. And I think that there's probably not very many of those business to business deals happening in esports right now. There may be some, but I don't think that the sponsorships in esports outside of maybe your top 12 to 15 organizations are very massive compared to like a motorsports sponsorship and activation partnership. So I think there's an avenue for me to work that business to business within esports and utilize the contacts and the retailers that I had from my racing side, but do it at a smaller level. Obviously I'm going to be selling sponsorship for less in esports than I was in racing, but I do think the ceiling is much higher in esports than it is in racing when it comes to the marketing and activation. You can get a very, very high bang for your buck in esports compared to that of NASCAR or honestly any other sport for that matter. So it's just trying to figure out how I can put those deals on paper and translate the two. But I think that these companies that are involved in motorsports right now that are doing some type of business to business are going to see that it's cheaper for them to work with me on the esports side, and they're getting the exact same value, if not more. So that's kind of the approach I've been taking as far as bringing some of these companies over from the racing industry into the esports side of things. But all these companies obviously want to see the foundation, so they want to see, yeah, you're offering us this on the back end, but what is your organization, your company, what does it have to show for itself right now? So that's been my biggest thing. I mean, I've only been in business since May, so we're very, very new, and I've tried to just continue to build that following and credibility up to where I can go to these companies and say, okay, this is what I built and this is what I can offer you. Let's make something happen. So
Yeah, that makes sense. You know, I tweeted about this the other night actually. The sponsorship space, or the sponsorship kind of process or lack thereof in the esports space, I feel, at least from what I've seen on the outside of the bubble side of it, is just very half-assed.
yep.
To put it in, I guess, to one phrase. There's a lot of people that, think they're just gonna say, "Oh, we'll put your logo on our jerseys," and what does that what does that mean for if you're, say, a supplement company? We'll put your logo on our jerseys. Does that mean we get free tubs for a month, or we get a free tub for everybody? Or you're a peripheral company and you sell headsets. Oh, we'll put your logo on our jersey and you'll give us free headsets for a year or something like that. Like, I think due to the communication or what's perceived to the public is, where was I going? I had words and I lost them. The way that the public perceives what goes on is kind of it paints a picture to that public, and sometimes they get the wrong idea of what actually goes on behind the table. So, hypothetical, a company like yours, just because, it's safe to say yours, works with a company like, call it, you have Plantronics on. You work with Plantronics, you do all these activations, you shoot all these videos with your players, and there's like a true relationship there. You see Video X increases sales on Plantronics website. They tell you that. You go back and forth. You do all these things, put together whatever. Maybe it's a live streaming weekend where you do a live stream that's, working with them, and you're putting out content around them. That's the type of stuff that it should be when you have a relationship or a sponsorship with a company, because they're giving you money. You gotta hold up your end of the deal.
So that's I'm glad you said that. I mean, it's been one of the shocking things for me coming into the esports industry is seeing how many people do it wrong.
Yeah.
And I'm not telling them, I'm not necessarily saying that I'm doing it 100% right by any means, because I think there's a lot of stuff that I need to learn still. And like I said, I'm still very new to this industry, period. But that's where functioning in motorsports has really developed the business side of who I am. And then coming here, I feel like I can successfully implement it and be miles ahead of 95% of the community, because I would say the top 5 to 10% of organizations understand how to promote and develop positive relationships with companies, and then the bottom 90% don't. And I think, I'm not going to say it's a lack of, I don't even know how to really word it, but yeah, basically, you have to create some type of ROI for said company. You can't just, everyone thinks that that's just how it functions in this industry. Like, they think that if you give me free product and I'll put you on my jersey, and then that's going to benefit you. But how is it going to benefit them? Like, you just, maybe if you're Optic, like, or 100 Thieves, but like, even at that, you know damn well 100 Thieves is going to do like more content around your product than anybody else. So like, those are the organizations that are doing it right. Now, granted, to do it right, it takes money, but you have to be able to at least show that with X amount of money, I'm going to be doing this for you. And everyone just struggles with that in this industry, I feel like. And I mean, racing is a very educated business sport. You're dealing with, for me to sell one race in the NASCAR Gander Outdoors Truck Series, so that's like the AAA. So it's like the third series in line in NASCAR. We race on Friday nights on Fox Sports 1. So that's a pretty high tier national series for NASCAR. It's on national television.
Right.
It costs anywhere from 30 to 100 grand per race to run in that.
And that's,
so those.
Sorry, that's just so, because I don't fully understand this, and I'm sure people listening don't fully understand this. So that you said that dollar amount is for you to get onto the track, or that's for? Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. So that is how much it takes to run one truck at said race. So all these drivers are bringing sponsorship. And a lot of them are, and this is like an entirely different podcast we can get into, so I'm not going to get into it. But basically, racing is a rich kid's sport, pretty much.
Yeah.
And people like me are shit out of luck. So I have to work and grind for every little bit that I've got. But, that obviously makes me who I am, and I'm very fortunate for that. But you're dealing with very large amounts of money in racing. So the business side of things in racing has taught me how to be extremely professional when it comes to building a marketing deck or building a sponsorship proposal or anything business related or marketing related that has to do with showing the sponsor how you can benefit them, I guess. And there's just an uneducated wave per se on the business side of things in esports, and people just fight that, I think, with their organizations.
Yeah, no, I definitely, we're on the same page with that, I think. And marketing, I feel like I could talk about it forever. It's one of those things that I find very interesting, and I have absolutely no knowledge of it. Like, no schooling, just whatever we've done that has either worked or not worked, and a lot of trial and error. But it's just such an interesting thing that I really wish I had hands-on access to a brand the size of 100 Thieves or a similar brand, and had a trial run on running their marketing, to even if it's a B2B like sales type thing. I feel like that would be something super interesting to me to do on as a next thing or another thing to do. But marketing just is super interesting to me just because it's very I want to say what's the word I'm looking for here? It's very like you get what you put in. If you do it right, you just scale it, and it's very linear or exponential growth. But it's very much you once you get something right, you scale that and you keep doing it. Marketing, it just seems like a lot of fun. I'd love to do it.
Yeah, it's very complex, but at the same time, it's simple.
Yeah.
Like if you can figure out what makes your company function in a positive light, then you just put more money to it, basically.
Yeah.
That's the problem, with an upstart is you've got to have money. Like the cliche saying, got to have money to make money. Well, it's not necessarily true, but in order to promote your business correctly, you do have to have money, or in order to reach the people that you want to reach, you've got to have money. Like for Total Advantage, I could have ditched the whole esports thing and just been a streamer content based team. Granted, I don't have a passion just to do that. Yeah. I think it's a huge integral part of growing as a business is having those people creating content for you every day. Ideally, your professional players or your amateur players or whoever would be playing for the organization on the esports side would be creating content. That's why Optic was so successful.
Yeah.
But I could have just went straight, took a approach, like a lot of organizations can do this too. I mean, you can take the approach of going straight for these content creators, and you can pick up all these small little content creators, and that's great. And, they're going to support your brand. But in order to be successful, I feel like if it was me and I was doing just a content creation organization, I would figure out how I could get up enough money to go after 3 to 8 content creators that had an impact, like a large following, and build my entire brand specifically around them. Like you launch the brand with them and you grow with them, but in order to do that, it takes money. But what happens is when you can take all of these creators, compile them into a pitch deck, and you have all their analytics, well, now I'm bringing in companies that otherwise wouldn't have even touched me because of the amount of reach I have through them. So there's a lot of things that you can, I think that's a successful business plan within esports too. But then you just kind of have to decide, do I want to be strictly content creation or do I want to have an esports focus? And for me, I'm a competitor. I grew up playing sports, and obviously I race, for part of my living as well. So I wanted to compete. So that was kind of, I think there's a way to be successful on both sides, and it's whoever can start with one and then implement the other. Those are the people that are going to be successful the most. So
Yeah, I agree 100%. So when we back when I tweeted today, seeing if there's any questions that people wanted to ask you, I did get one. We
All
have
right,
we
got one.
have we have Andy, who's the CEO of Team Insight, who's actually one of the teams that the Sector 6 guys in
S6
Hazard.
does them, right?
Yeah, we work with them. So he asked, just started my own gaming/lifestyle organization. What are some ways to get noticed in such a saturated and competitive industry? And I think that's a really good question. I think we touched on it a little bit about how you boost those numbers. But what are your thoughts on, like, I guess, getting noticed? And esports is definitely not overly saturated, but very saturated.
So the first thing you need to do, well, first thing I did, and I think this is very important, and be an actual business.
Yeah. Oof.
That's a that's a big one. Like all these organizations you see on Twitter, um, I'm not gonna say all of them. There's a lot of quote unquote organizations, and any major, I guess, organization owner would probably tell you this, but be an actual business by the means of have a legal document that says you're an actual business.
Yeah.
Because for one, you can get into a lot of legal problems down the road, but otherwise there's no structure.
Yeah.
And when you're pitching to companies or like even working with Sector 6, like for us, like for me, um, even working with companies trying to build a relationship with apparel providers or what have you, it's much easier if you can appear professionally from that aspect. But all of that aside, I mean, I think branding is a very important part. You want to have something unique. I mean, I feel like what I did with Total Advantage, my racing culture is always something that's going to separate me from anything else or any of these other organizations involved in esports, because I'm really the only NASCAR related organization out there, I believe. Now, I haven't tried to incorporate a lot of that into it yet, but it's in my future plans with like the kind of content that I'm trying to put through. Now, actually, I would say like a lot of our promotional posts and our graphics are a lot of those ideas and concepts come from the NASCAR side of things, just because of what I'm used to. But I think branding is very important. You want to have a logo that stands out. You want to have something that you're very passionate about, something that means a lot to you, and you don't want to be contemplating your team name or your logo a year and a half from now or 8 months from now and wondering why you chose that. And then as far as getting noticed, I mean, it's difficult. Like it's hard. It's hard to build social media. I would say don't try to do too many things at once. Try to focus on like one or two, either esports genres, and slowly work through that, because this stuff is not cheap. Like it costs money to send teams to things and to, I guess, groom players more or less. But I would say start small and try to focus on doing the best you can at a few things. I think a lot of organizations try to just bring in 50 content creators for no reason and don't create any content around them. They just tweet out a going live post.
Yeah.
So that's one thing that I would say is pretty big too. And then as you start, developing, or as you start concentrating on those few genres or areas of esports, you can create content around those and slowly start getting it out that way. But it's all, the more money you have, the easier it's going to be too. So I would say those are probably the main things. And what I did with Total Advantage is I focused on one, and I'm not saying this is the correct way, but I focused on one platform, one social media platform. So I said, I'm going to grow my Twitter and focus on growing my Twitter until I have a foundation. And then I'm going to start growing my Instagram and my YouTube and things like that, because YouTube, for one, is a very expensive platform to grow on, because in order to do it correctly, you've got to have high level production. So I think that's probably the hardest is from an organization standpoint, because the content you're wanting to create is surrounding your players. Well, in order to create content around your players, you got to have your players in one place. Well, to do that, you're going to events, but at the same time, it's still difficult, because even my Call of Duty players, I only have one that lives within driving distance of me. So like that's difficult. But I would say choose one platform on social media and really try to be as professional as possible on your social media. Make sure your headers and your profile pictures and everything meshes and goes together and it looks professional, because the first thing people see when they go to your page is the top of your profile, and if it doesn't look good, then they're not going to stay.
Yeah.
But like for Total Advantage, I think we are closing in on 1,500 Twitter followers, which for me is definitely an achievement considering how long ago we started.
Mm-hmm.
But like my Instagram, I just started posting on it like 2 weeks ago, so I only have a couple hundred followers on there. And YouTube, we only have like 2 videos. So those are things that I'm going to focus heavy on in 2020. Now that I'm starting to get some cash flow coming in, that I can start hiring an editor and stuff like that, because there's only so much that you can do by yourself. Like,
Oh, for sure.
yeah, so like I've pretty much bit off as much as I could chew as far as the graphic design and editing and all that stuff goes. Like at this point, I've got my baby walking, and that's about all I can do for it.
Yeah. Yeah, that makes sense.
So
I think
that was a lot, but that was
yeah.
pretty much my.
I think you covered. I mean that. That's your 10-second breakdown on it. Long 10 seconds, but
Yeah, sorry.
no, it's all good.
I started rambling.
The only thing I would probably add to that is consistency, because like any type of content you're going to put out, you could put the greatest content out, and you could get like you mentioned YouTube. So you could pay a guy to give you 5 videos. They're the best videos you've ever seen, some Hollywood level stuff, and then you go and you post them Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, and then that's it, and then you have no more videos. But you spent 10 grand on them, and you post all those videos, and there's no substance to it, and there's no time for it to fester and kind of go through the organic growth process and all those things. And then you have no money. So then you got to put up money to, say it's another 5 grand to do another 5 videos, and you don't have that money for another month. But if you back it up and you plan it so you have 5 weeks of every Monday or whatever day it is, you have content to just kind of fester and then promote, and then whatever you're going to do with it to have that organic growth, that type of thing is super important, because if you run out of content, you have no content, or if you burn out, if you post all your content and you have all this growth and you're call it 25 days in a row you put up, if you're what is it, what's a good content idea for like a Fortnite player? Say you have like a cool clip that you're going to put up. You have 25 days in a row that you have really cool clips, and then you burn out and you don't know what to do for the next 3 days or 4 days. You just kind of you lose that traction. So I think consistency is definitely key, and I see it all the time. Like our Twitter is definitely by leaps and bounds the biggest platform that we have, and we're working on growing out other platforms, and Instagram has been the baby of mine that I've really taken a lot of pride in growth. And every time I go 3 or 4 days without posting on there, I see it, or I feel it on the growth side. So, consistency, I think, is the up there with one of the most important things. And I liked how you mentioned brand. Brand is obviously the first and foremost thing, because nobody wants to follow a brand that doesn't speak to them. And then what else did you mention? Like knowing what you want to do and not having second thoughts on it. I think that's really, really big as well. If you, like you said, if you turn around and you have second thoughts, nobody's going to want to follow somebody who's got second thoughts on their own brand. And make it fun. Do something that, turn your brand, or make sure your brand is about something that you enjoy doing. So I think that's it, because then you'll meet other people that are interested in what you do, because that's just kind of natural. And they just kind of go from there, obviously.
I would say one more thing to add to it is don't get discouraged by other brands or organizations that have growth or show growth, or even if you see some Twitter accounts with 15, 20K, 30K, a good, don't be, I guess, discouraged at the fact that your organization has however many followers, because honestly, a lot of times those accounts have bot followers, and you can look at their activation and see if they're truly have the marketing value that appears in their follower account. So just don't get discouraged when growth is slow, because I've had times on my Total Advantage Twitter account where we've been growing slowly. And then there's times where we gain 30, 40 followers in a day, which I would say is good growth on Twitter for being small. And there's really no rhyme or reason to it. I'm posting the same content I post when I gain 2 followers a day, when I gain 30, but I'm consistently posting and trying to post 3 to 4 times a day. And I'm interacting with my audience too. So that's a big thing, is trying to develop a community, which I'm trying to do here locally in the North Carolina area. And that's another story. But you want people to want to be a part of something, whether they're a member or a fan. Like there has to be some type of value there for them to follow.
Yeah.
So.
Yep. No, I agree. I think that is the. I mean, it's not a very straightforward roadmap to growth, but it's those are all the pieces you need.
Obviously, we're still learning.
Yeah. I think it's you just got to get in the trenches and you just got to kind of do it. It's one of those like, you're not just gonna wake up to triple, quadruple numbers. It's just you got to just do it. It's the most, I guess, direct way to do anything.
And be proud of it.
Yeah. Being proud of it. Yeah. Being not being happy about what you're doing, or kind of living. I guess what's the word? I don't know. I don't know where I'm going. But yeah, not being proud about what you're doing is definitely not going to help grow. Because you are always going to be your brand's biggest fan, and it has to be that way. Otherwise, nobody else.
Yeah, you got to have a passion for what you're doing, and I mean, anytime you bring one more person to your brand, whether it be as a fan or a member, I mean, that's an exciting time. So it's been fun for me to meet the people that have interacted with Total Advantage just over the last 5 months. And whether it be, our competitive teams or players, or, people that are fans of the content side of things that we've just recently started doing. So that's been interesting to me. It's been fun. Obviously, I hope to continue to have, growth in those areas. But I guess that's pretty much all I can add to that, really.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm still trying to figure it out myself every day. So.
Yeah, I agree. Same here. It's a good topic. Definitely a good topic. You can talk about it for a while.
I would be interested to hear like a bunch of other people's opinion on that, honestly. Like just to see kind of the mindset behind a number of the organizations that are within the scene right now, or that are in the scene right now. I think it would be interesting to hear owners and people that are operating social accounts and what they have to say on that topic in general. Like that would be honestly, that would be a badass YouTube video.
I agree. Yeah, I agree. Yeah, well, if you're listening to this on YouTube, feel free to drop a comment. I think we're coming up on an hour here, so I think probably good time to start to wrap things up a little bit. Was there anything that we skipped over, or that we didn't touch on enough that you want to circle back to, or anything like that?
I mean, I think we pretty much covered everything. I know I got off on a few tangents, but that's typical of me. So
yeah, that's all good.
Wouldn't be a good podcast if we didn't, right?
No, I agree. That's the point. We're supposed to lull people to sleep, I think, right?
Yeah, for sure.
So yeah, if that's all said and done, the shameless plug time of the episode is coming up here. So, where are people going to be able to find you or Total Advantage? What's the best place to contact you if they have questions, or if they want to follow you, or things like that? This is your spot.
Yeah, obviously, like I said, Twitter is probably our main social media platform at the moment, but all of our social media handles are at Total Advantage G, with the letter G at the end of it, for gaming. We do have a website. It's totaladvantage.org. So you can find us there. You can contact us through the website, or you can feel free to shoot us a DM through our social media. I try to get back to pretty much everyone who does message the organization account. And also feel free to message me through my personal Twitter account too. It's at Landon Huffman, but I try to respond, and I'm very interactive on my personal social media as well. It's more of a racing I guess scene on that account, but either way you can get a hold of me, so I'm open to responding on either of those.
Cool. All right, you heard the man. Hit him up. But other than that, if you made it this far and you haven't liked, commented, subscribed, followed, whatever it is on the platform that you listen to, I definitely appreciate that. That helps me out, helps me grow the podcast and things like that. So do that. And then if you already did all that, then great. We'll catch you in the next one. See you later.